Your Agile transformation is on a path to failure. It might not be today, and it might not be tomorrow. It might not even be during your career, but eventually it will fail. The organization will forget about continuous improvement. It'll start to feel safe within its success and forget how to question the status quo. Forget how to be agile. The reason for this isn't going to be because of any one singular person or even someone acting maliciously. It is because the foundation on which we have built our agile transformations is fundamentally flawed. We are running from one disaster and heading towards another, stuck on a circuitous path that will never end. The reason your agile transformation is on a path to failure is because of something so inherent to organizations, most people don't even see it. It is so inherent, we have not really questioned it over the last 20 years. It is like the air that surrounds you, or the water that surrounds a fish. And if we don't start questioning it, we will not be able to see the dangers lying just outside of our context. But if we can leap out of that water, and we can see the different context, we'll be able to plan for these dangers before they become a problem. And if we're lucky, see the path towards a long-term agile future. Today I'm going to show you the fundamental structure holding back your organization. I'm going to provide you with the safe path forward towards lasting agility. Today I'm going to show you a leadership evolution. Hi, I'm Kent Brown, and over the last 21 years, I've been focusing on the problem of how do we consistently bridge the gap between coming up with a good idea and that idea benefiting humanity. And it was while looking at this problem that I started to recognize the role that leadership plays in creating an environment of innovation. A strong leader can go into any organization and create a place where people thrive. But oftentimes, when that leader leaves, that environment goes with them. So it was looking at this problem that I wanted to identify what caused it. And it was while doing this that I found the underlying structure, the underlying hypothesis that we've developed our modern business on that is causing us to fail. And if we don't rectify it, we are going to fail. So it was while trying to solve this problem that I came up with the concept of leadership evolution. And while the rest of the world was shutting down over the last year, we were ramping up. We were putting together cross-functional and cross-departmental leadership teams to bring the products our customer needs to market. And our customers couldn't have been happier. It allowed them to get what they needed in this chaotic time. So before I get into how to establish these cross-functional leadership teams, I want to take a step back and I want to talk about this inherent flaw that we found within our organizations. When looking at the work that happens in our organizations, we usually talk about the development work. This is the work our teams are accountable for. This is the designing for the customer experience, the coding of the new features, the testing for quality, the releasing to production, and the continued operations and maintenance of the application. It is all the activities required to produce value for a customer and maintain a healthy product. When it comes to this type of work, we know what we need to do. We've gotten so good at creating successful product teams that this doesn't even break a sweat for most Agilists. But this isn't the only type of work needed for an organization to be successful. There is another type of work, a type of work called management work. Management work is all the activities required to grow, maintain, scale, and align the different parts of an organization. Without these types of work, it is impossible to even have an organization. Management work is the glue that holds an organization together and allows it to thrive. Now I know what you're thinking, and management work isn't the same thing as being a manager or even managing. Lots of different roles do management work, and just because you're doing management work doesn't mean you have to manage. We as a community have looked deeply into how to perform management work better. And we all know that doing this work as a servant leader produces way better results than just managing. But we're not here to talk about the best way to perform management work. Instead, we're going to look at the underlying structures we use to conduct management work. Before we look at the underlying structures, I want to take a moment to make sure we're all on the same page about the different categories of management work. First, there is process. Process is the work required to foster the environment where we work. It is deciding the team structure. It is the framework we use to get the work done. It is how we interact. Process is choosing to use Scrum or Waterfall. It is choosing to develop a product or complete a project. Process is required for people to work together. Next, there is people. People is about finding and retaining the right people for your organization. It is the administrative and interpersonal activities required to have people work. This is the training of new skills, the performance reviews, the hiring and onboarding, the promotions and offboarding. People is required if you want to have more than just you in your organization. Quality is about determining what good looks like. It is about setting the standards and sticking to it. The analogy that I like to use for quality comes from Russell Acroft. Quality isn't about building a better smoke detector, it is about building a fireproof house. What that means is that quality is about catching the bug before production, but not even having the bug in the first place. Quality is required to establish a consistent expectation about what you deliver across a large number of people. Finally, there's value. Value is about identifying the next most important thing to work on and communicating that with those who will be doing the work. Value is about maximizing the return on investment so the organization can thrive. This is the aligning of priorities, generating excitement about vision, and measuring the outcomes from deliverables. Value is important because without it, you have a ship without a rudder. Value is required to create cohesion within your organization. Without all four of these activities, an organization and its teams cannot maintain a healthy balance and will suffer. Historically, the four categories of management work were given to a single manager under the false hypothesis of a single strong man. And don't get me wrong, when this idea was created, it was assumed that this person would be a man. It was hypothesized that to have an effective organization, you needed to promote the strongest people to the top and weed out those who were inferior. It was believed that some people were just better than others, and therefore it gave them the innate right to command and control. Since this hypothesis was created during the Industrial Revolution, it quickly became common practice in many organizations that created our modern world. And this is why it remains hidden in plain sight. It became the polluted air we breathe. We couldn't even see the inherent flaws within the system. Since the 1800s, our understanding of what it takes to lead has evolved. The original hypothesis has been proven wrong over and over. There is no mythical strongest person. There is no innate right to command and control. This hypothesis has been shown to consistently not produce the desired results we need in our modern world. The reason for this hypothesis consistently falling short of expectations is that a single person cannot possibly be good at all categories of management work. The reason for this is that the different categories require people to have different expertise and use different areas of their brain. The same skills required to be good at envisioning a new product are useless when it comes to completing administrative tasks. The mindset required to maintain consistent quality standards is the opposite required for identifying new ways of working. Therefore, most people are good at one of these categories. It is rare to find someone who can perform two of these categories well. To find someone who can do three of these categories is a miracle, and you are looking for a unicorn, something that doesn't exist if you expect to find someone who's good at all four categories. So, with the assumption being a single strong person, when you start to create an organizational hierarchy, if a manager is not able to perform all of the four activities, which no person can, the organization will suffer. All is not lost though. We've already taken steps towards dismantling the single strong person hypothesis. With the original Scrum proposal, we fractured the single project manager into different roles. The Scrum Master looked after the process, the product owner looked after the value. This worked well within a team, but when we scale out to additional teams and to additional departments, the lack of leadership for people and quality starts to cause an issue. Someone needs to be accountable for these categories of management work. This is why communities of practice have become common in many organizations, and we're seeing adoption of tech leads, practice leads, or organizations maintaining technology managers. These are all subconscious attempts to rectify the issue of management work not being completed. It is when we recognize that each individual leader has their own strengths and has their own weaknesses that we can evolve from this single person hypothesis into a culture where different people bring their authentic selves and provide the greatest value. Each individual doing what they naturally do best to help the organization thrive. The question is, in your organization, have you gone far enough or have you gone too far as you scaled out your Agile leadership? Have you introduced bugs into your structure because you haven't addressed the underlying problem of the single strong person hypothesis? Have you introduced leadership depth into your organization? So looking at your organization, ask yourself, who is accountable for the different categories of management work? How have I confused those leaders about what they are accountable? What can we do to better support our leaders to focus on one of these categories? By asking yourself these questions, we can start to look at what the underlying strategy we have for organization. Do we have too many leaders, or do we not have enough? Do I expect too much of my leaders, and what can I do better to support them? Am I setting up my people and the organization for success? At this point, you're asking yourself, everything is good, right? People are now focused on one category of management work? Many organizations get to this point. They implement Scrum Masters and product owners. They even get to the point that they implement people leaders and quality leads. With each leader now able to focus on just one aspect of management work, you start to see leaders stretch their new roles. People are excited. They start to explore their new space and you see a bump in productivity. And for a time, you get more done and people are happy. Eventually, though, the issues inherent to the underlying system start to sneak back in. We form new positions to manage the new leaders and pin each leader against each other to see who will survive. We expect that a Scrum Master will be promoted to an Agile coach, will be promoted to an Agile director, will eventually be promoted to some executive. We still perpetuate the single strong person hypothesis, but now we're doing it with different leaders. What usually started out as excitement for the transformation gradually becomes finger pointing and the blame game. People become afraid to speak up when they notice something was wrong. Low psychological safety is the norm in many conversations. People become apathetic about their place in the organization or leave to find a different opportunity that still has the Agile spark. The accountabilities that leaders have become neglected and start to suffer. The dysfunction results in the degradation of these new positions and eventually the Agile transformation as a whole. Oftentimes, the structure remains, but the spirit of agility is gone. The gradual degradation to these roles is caused by an inherent aspect of the single strong person organizational structure. When it is assumed that a single strong person is going to control everything, it is beneficial to have a culture where people compete. For organizations that are using the single strong person hypothesis, the us versus them culture is not only encouraged, but required to move up the organizational hierarchy, because that is the only way you find the strongest person. Looking at this diagram, we can see the false dichotomy created between the us and them. It is either us wins or them wins. We are stuck in a win-lose situation, and more often than not, we are all losing. We will visualize the competitive culture as a red line going forward. Alternatively, a large benefit of moving into an agile structure is generated by having a collaborative culture, different people working together towards a common purpose. To visualize this environment, we need to add a new dimension to our conversation. We move away from the false dichotomy between us and them and instead visualize our individual success as a scale. How much can us win, and how much can them win? This new perspective allows us to visualize the situation where both us and them will win. This is the win-win situation. In a collaborative environment, it is always possible to find a path towards common success. Mapping these two environments over each other, we see that the red line, showing the competitive culture, is a bounded system, meaning there are a limited number of possibilities for you to succeed. At best you can hope for is the red limit, although most of the time you are somewhere below that line as people spend more and more time on politics and jockeying for position, and less doing valuable work. On the other hand, the collaborative culture is an unbounded system. There's an infinite number of situations for you to succeed. In the collaborative culture, it is even possible to create environments that in a competitive culture would be impossible. For example, I helped a group of leaders that was stuck in a competitive mindset. This group had people accountable for value, quality, people, and process. This group of leaders had argued for months and maybe even years about the structure that a collection of teams would need to take. A collection of teams had a common, monolithic legacy application which needed to be replaced, and also shared a lot of similar product KPIs and developer skill sets. One part of the group wanted to optimize for value, so they had proposed to change the team structure to better match the customer needs. The other group wanted to optimize for quality, so would not accept anything that made it harder for them to focus on retiring the legacy application. While they argued about which of these two options they were going to do, the team suffered in the current structure. No one was happy. And that structure was created as a result of them trying to compromise the last time they had the exact same conversation. During my time with these leaders, I focused on getting them to understand the environment they were stuck in and visualize the benefits of working within a collaborative culture. After the group had spent months arguing with each other and no closer to resolution than when they started, in a matter of hours working with them, they were able to identify a new team structure that was not possible to see with a competitive mindset. They created an innovative structure that allowed them to produce new value for the customer while retiring the legacy application. Now that we understand the issues with the competitive culture, the challenge is figuring out how to cross these turbulent waters and become a collaborative culture. How to eliminate another aspect of the single strong person hypothesis. The good news is that we already know the solution. In fact, it is the same solution we've been teaching to development teams for years. Form a team. Remove the remaining incentives for leaders to compete with their fellow leaders and generate an environment where they both win by collaborating. So, in the same way that we form cross-functional development teams, we also form cross-functional leadership teams. We create an environment where leaders can be more productive together than they ever could individually. This leadership team does everything that a product team would do. They are a team. To become a team, and not just a group of individuals, the leaders follow the same 4 rules of a team that every other team would follow. The team has a clear purpose. The team has real-time access to the skills required to be successful. Everyone is needed on the team. The team wins and loses together. To get this innovative model of leadership started in your organization, you will need 7 key artifacts. These artifacts generate long-term success and set a new culture. Think of these as automated tests for your system. The artifacts establish an exponentially improving environment we can direct towards achieving an organization's vision. The first of these artifacts is a clear purpose and set of accountabilities for the leadership team. Ideally, the purpose and accountabilities speak to the complex problems that the leadership team needs to solve, and not get bogged down in the minutiae of the ordered problem domain. Here you're explaining what the organization needs from the leadership team. You're setting the leader's focus. While working to create the artifacts, ask yourself, what development teams will the leadership team be leading? What high-level complex problems will the leadership solve? Now that you understand the purpose for the leadership team, it is time to identify its members. Dedicate leaders to only one leadership team. Having leaders dedicated to a single team allows them to form into a high-functioning team. Without the leaders being dedicated to a single team, you will eventually recreate the leadership web, resulting in meeting paralysis. In addition, represent all categories of management work within the team, but the team should only consist of those leaders needed to fulfill its purpose. If you do not have enough leaders of a certain type, it is better to have a leadership team cover more than one area of the organization than to have leaders in more than one leadership team. While working to create this artifact, ask yourself, are all categories of management work represented within the leadership team? What is the strategy we're using to craft leadership teams so the organization will be successful? Next, consolidate the success metrics for the leaders. Although they may have different positions and expertise, all the leaders need to be held accountable to the same metrics for success. Without this, individuals will optimize for their own self-gain instead of the benefit of the team. Remove as much as possible the individual success metrics originating from the roles and positions, and instead transfer them into the leadership team. The leadership team must win and lose together. While creating these artifacts, ask yourself, are these all the success metrics the leaders are held to? Do these success metrics help the leadership team achieve their purpose? At this point, establish the constraints. What decisions can leaders make freely, and which ones do they need to get more input from other leaders? Ideally, when creating these constraints, keep them within the complex problem-solving domain. Use enabling constraints. There ought to be just enough constraints to keep the organization from falling into chaos, but not too many that you squash creative decision-making. This artifact is important to create the psychological safety between leadership teams and the organization. When someone is not aware where the limit is, we move slowly to the edge. When we know it is safe, we quickly spread out within our area. While crafting this artifact, ask yourself, have we created too many constraints and are stifling creative possibilities? Have we created the right constraints to protect the organization? Next, you need to establish the public measurements and feedback loops. From the success metrics, identify what measurements you'll use to determine whether the leadership team is moving in the right direction. The measurements ought to be visible to anyone who wants access and used regularly so that the leadership team knows the progress they've made towards their purpose. It is important that these measurements are public and discussed often. A hidden measurement helps no one improve. In addition, it is important that the measurements are actually measured. There needs to be some actual numbers and insights collected from the measurements. Otherwise, they will not produce the desired results of establishing a feedback loop. Finally, you'll need to establish a feedback loop on the artifacts themselves. In this feedback loop, update the artifacts to change the mental model toward one that better achieves the organization's objectives. While crafting this artifact, ask yourself, how will we measure the success metrics? Do these measurements reflect reality? The next artifact for many people may seem difficult to discuss, but without it, you will not be able to create the psychological safety required for your leadership team to completely fill the space. You need to establish team remediation and reward strategies. The leadership team needs to know what to expect if they excel in their purpose and what to expect if they fail. Allowing them to know what will happen if they fail will allow them to try new things. By knowing up front, the leadership team can better plan how they want to behave instead of tiptoeing into situations. In addition, this is a valuable mechanism for creating the win and lose as a team mentality. Showing up front how a team can win together and how a team can lose together solidifies the drive to be a team and eliminates the politics. So while creating this artifact, ask yourself, have we created an environment where the team wins together? Have we created an environment where the team loses together? Finally, you'll need to establish your own leadership evolution team. This team's purpose is to foster an environment where your organization can meet its leadership's potential. This team works with all leaders at all levels in understanding how to maximize their space. By focusing on solving the complex problems, this group produces an environment of heightened evolutionary change. The Leadership Evolution Team provides the coaching, mentoring, training, teaching, facilitation, and direction to all other leadership teams. When creating this artifact, ask yourself, how do we provide the space for our leaders to become amazing? How do we dismantle the single strong person structure within our organization? Now that we've dismantled two aspects of the single strong person hypothesis, the belief that a single person can do all categories of management work, and the belief that competition produces better results, we can start dismantling the last aspect, the belief that people have an innate right to lead. To do this, we're going to flip the organizational hierarchy on its head, and we're going to create a system that supports its people instead of just commanding them. From the iceberg diagram, we can start to see what different leaders will be focusing on. An organization is at risk of becoming stale without leaders actively working on each of these areas. It is only through maximizing each level in the iceberg that an organization can maintain an exponential improvement path. The first leadership team we're going to discuss is value generators. They are associated with events in the iceberg. These leaders are accountable for the day-to-day operations of the organization, predominantly focused on delivering the next most valuable piece of work. The value generators operate within the team, usually focusing on very tactical activities and responding rapidly to change. In organization, these leaders can be referred to as team leads, product owners, scrum masters, tech leads, or maybe even the product team itself. This leadership team is measured by the events that happen within the product team. For example, they could be measured against the value of the features they created, the bugs they introduced, how people are showing up to work day to day, and the process that the product team used to get the job done. It is this leadership team's actions and behaviors that creates the patterns of events that can be understood as the personality of the product team. The next group of leaders looks to improve this emergent personality. The environment creators looks at the recurring patterns of events originating from the product teams and identifies how to create an environment where new and improving patterns can emerge. The environment creators work to solve complex problems and establish the best possible environment for the value generators. For example, the environment creators could work on solving the problems of improving employee satisfaction, the team's maintaining a high predictability, or improving a team's skills and abilities. In organizations, this group of leaders is usually senior managers, agile coaches, senior scrum masters, product managers, associate directors, or technical program managers. It is through their actions that we stretch the organization's structures. By questioning how we are structured and pushing on the organization's boundaries, the environment creators expose how the organization's structure is failing our product teams. By exposing the failings within the organization structure, the directional strategists can now remove the systemic impediments to exponential growth. The directional strategists identify how our larger organizational structures are unintentionally constraining the product team's ability to succeed. This team looks at the long-term strategy for the organization and identifies better ways of working. In most organizations, the directional strategists are director or above. The directional strategist's success is measured by looking at whether the organization is regularly experiencing improvement step changes. Often this is seen as rapid growth as the other two leadership teams maximize the new space created for them by a structural change. It is by looking at the underlying structures within our organization that we expose the mental models we hold on to about how organizations should work. At this point, we can see biases and assumptions that we have built into our systems and are holding us back. The last leadership team is organization visionaries. In organizations, this group consists of VPs or people in the C-suite position. This leadership team constantly looks for and optimizes the underlying mental models we use. The organization visionaries identify the best possible mental models for the organization to thrive within the larger ecosystem. This team is establishing the vision for the organization by setting the base guidelines, structures, and focus. So what does this mean? It means we have a way out. It means we're not on a path to failure. We can create an environment of sustainable change, sustainable agility. All that we need to do is start questioning the underlying structures, start questioning the context in which we exist, see the air around us. And if we start improving these environments and start solving these complex problems, we can provide benefit to humanity. So, I'm asking you, will you join me on this leadership evolution? Will you help me create sustainable change?